You're listening to Mistreated. I'm Nam Kiwanuka. Before the 20th century, women-centered childbirth was essential for communities throughout Europe, Africa, Asia, and America. In this country, Indigenous midwives were once a cornerstone of every Indigenous community. But in the late 1800s to early 1900s, with the growth of Western medicine, midwives were accused of being unsanitary and unscientific. In 1910, the U.S. Flexner Report recommended hospital deliveries and the abolition of midwifery. Experts have since called the report racist, sexist, and classist. Then, in 1923, the Journal of the American Medical Association published a paper called The Midwife Problem, blaming high infant mortality on faulty obstetric practices. Calculated smear campaigns questioned the skills of midwives and called them ignorant and dirty. Even though the Flexner Report was commissioned by the American Medical Association, it seems to have shaped Canadian institutions as well. For decades, working midwives in Canada and the U.S. faced legal action and imprisonment. Before this, midwifery was a profession that empowered women from all backgrounds in Canada and the U.S., including Indigenous and enslaved Black women. But once childbirth became medicalized, institutions dominated by white men were now the ones in control of how women gave birth. Case in point, by the 1920s, the Department of Indian Affairs in America passed legislation that forced Indigenous women to leave their homes and travel away from their communities to give birth in hospitals. According to a study on Science Direct, this maternal evacuation would be implemented in Canada a few decades later. Quote, beginning in the 1960s, many Indigenous women were forced to leave their communities in their final trimester and travel to regional or southern hospitals to give birth. Over subsequent decades, growing governmental control over Indigenous childbirth led to increased evacuation and medicalization of Indigenous childbirth. By the early 1980s, almost all births took place outside most remote Indigenous communities. Throughout most of the 20th century, Canada was the only Western industrialized country with no legal guidelines or guardrails for midwifery. In 1994, after decades of midwives pushing back, Ontario became the first province in Canada to recognize and legalize midwives, meaning that midwives no longer had to operate in legal gray zones. So, consider this for a moment. If you had a baby before 1994, you didn't have the choice as to how you had your baby. And if you dared to use a midwife, they could be accused of practicing medicine without a medical license and fined or even charged criminally in some cases. In 2024, Prince Edward Island became the last province in Canada to introduce midwifery services. And earlier this year, the regulatory bodies MPEI for nurses and midwives merged into one college. It's been said that history repeats itself, and when it comes to the business of birth and women's health, 2026 might as well be 1970-something. Amid a worsening maternal health crisis, some states in America are once again banning midwives or creating that legal gray zone where the midwife problem lived for most of the 20th century. In Canada, midwives could help to fill in the gaps in our strained health system. In Ontario, midwives have been fighting to close the pay gap. And in 2024, the government expanded the responsibilities of midwives so they can prescribe and administer more medication. If the history of midwives is this complicated in the global north, what is it like to practice as a midwife in places experiencing civil unrest or conflict? A new documentary follows 5 midwives who are doing that work. Here's a sneak peek.
I couldn't unsee what I saw. I decided that I wanted to do something.
On today's episode, we speak to 2 of the midwives and the director of the delivery line, Midwives on the Frontlines. We speak about the challenges of the work that these midwives do, but also about the joy of catching a baby. They join me now.
I watched the delivery line, Midwives on the Frontlines, and I was completely blown away with this documentary. I'm so glad that you're all here to talk about it. If you could introduce yourselves. Nance, I'll start with you.
I'm Nance Ackerman. I'm the filmmaker and co-producer with Sergio Kirby, director, cinematographer, editor, bottle washer.
Jill of all trades. And Ximena?
Yeah, I'm a midwife. My name is Ximena Rojas Garcia. I'm from Mexico, and I live at the border, San Diego, the United States, Tijuana, Mexico. And I've been serving the migrant community for 10 years now. Yeah.
And Jay?
My name is Jay MacGillivray. I'm a midwife. I've been a midwife for 40 years and have done various types of midwifery through that, including working on the U.S.-Mexico border, but working in HIV and now doing street work.
I'm really looking forward to our conversation. I have to make a little bit of a confession. I was born in the Civil War. I lived in a refugee camp, but I actually never gave any thought of what it must be like to give birth in a conflict zone. And I'm also a mother of two. So this documentary is really eye-opening. Nance, I wanted to start with you. This documentary was filmed over 8 years in 5 different countries and with 5 different midwives. Why did you want to tell the story of midwives in this way?
Well, it's sort of a twofold reason. I had both my babies at home with midwives, and one was I went into premature labor and it was stopped by myself and a midwife. Together, we worked together to keep the premature labor and have the baby at term, and it worked out beautifully. And so I just felt that midwives, the empowerment and the nurturing, loving experience that I had, bordering on spiritual and respectful experience that I had, it just made me believe that this was really the only way to give birth in, obviously in a healthy birthing situation. But I've also been a photojournalist for 35 years, and I had covered so many war zones and crisis zones, so many social issues. I've covered a lot of social issues around the world, and I just thought this is one way to explore these issues from a female lens, because we've seen all these issues just, coming at us full force, largely from a male perspective, to be honest.
Well, the countries you traveled to felt very intentional. How did you choose the locations and the midwives you featured?
Well, it was mostly issue-based. So we wanted to cover sort of the issues of our planet, like climate change, migration, poverty, homelessness, drug addiction, drug wars, terrorism. So all these things we wanted to cover in a way that had some hope. We found the midwives through just research, and I saw a New York Times article with Ximena. I had with all the Afghan refugees coming in when we first started, we reached out to another midwife in Toronto, and she recommended, talk to Jay. You have to talk to Jay. So it's word of mouth and finding those organizations that are doing that work, the NGOs in those countries. And usually if you get the recommendation from 2 or 3 different people, and I asked another midwife in San Diego, and you have to meet Ximena. So you just get, if you hear from 3 different people that this is your midwife, then we knew. Also, it's like, shooting fish in a barrel to find an amazing midwife doing amazing work. There are thousands, hundreds of thousands around the world doing this work. So it really isn't difficult to find amazing women.
What I thought was so powerful was that each midwife in the community that they're serving is under such unique circumstances. But I guess the core part of it is women who are giving birth in under very difficult circumstances. And Ximena, you showed so much care to the expectant moms. In the documentary, you say this, for many of them, this is the first time anyone has asked to touch their bodies. Correct. And that kind of just, even now as I'm saying it, I just feel like the goosebumps through my body. Yeah. Even the moms-to-be that you were helping, they also seem to be surprised to hear that coming from you. Why do you approach what you do in that way?
Well, sometimes for many of us, we have been raised or we have been growing under the assumption that women's bodies is a territory that has to be inspected or studied. So, yeah, we are changing the world in a way when we give back the power to every woman, to every pregnant person, that we ask consent, the real consent of their body, to be able to work with them and go through their pregnancy journey and ask them for permission, ask them for information to go with them along with their journey. And it is healing. It is healing for them, for us, for the whole community. And I really like that in the film we can get to see a little piece of the world conflict, the world sadness and the wounds. And midwives, we are the healers in a way, where we are planting seeds of peace around the world with all these, I would say, radical tenderness and little ways to heal day by day with peace and love and changing anyone's life with providing a good beginning. So.
It's interesting you said radical, because it did feel radical in the documentary itself. And Jay, I have to admit that I was really surprised to see a midwife in Ontario in this documentary. We live in a G7 country, and I think the assumption that most of us have is that during pregnancy, if you need care, you will get the care that you need. Why did you want to be part of this documentary?
Well, I was approached to be part of it. But I think it's also important, if you're looking at things with a global view, then you have to also include yourself in that view. Otherwise, you stand back and you're evaluating. But if you see your own self reflected or your own country reflected in a global way, then you can find a place for things. And as a midwife who is working now exclusively with people outside who have not got housing, who don't have food, who don't have clothing, who don't have community. And when they're pregnant, very often those pregnancies are not planned. And so trying to find the care, it's very difficult because a lot of people don't want to work with somebody who is, and I'm talking about providers now, just generally providers, don't want to work with somebody they think is going to take a lot of time because of social issues. But these social issues have been imposed on people.
And bias too, I guess.
Pardon me?
Bias?
Oh, yeah. Racism in Ontario healthcare is rampant. And I think this is particularly true. And if you can, like Ximena was saying, that it is radical, even in these days, to give back to women something that has been taken from them, or anybody who's having a baby, that they should be able to dictate how their body is going to react and allow it to react. We get in the way so often throughout the prenatal course and the birth itself and postpartum. But for the people that I work with, like Ximena, if somebody's never been asked if they can touch you, then they just give away so much, particularly the women with whom I work. A lot of them have been abused terribly, particularly on the street. They have to find protection for nighttime and just against men. So a lot of them have to hook up with men simply to be protected on the street.
One of the things that I learned when I was researching this conversation was at one point in Canada, midwives, like if you practice midwifery, it was against the law. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, there's very few of us, I think, left practicing who were from that time, but I am one of them. And if you wanted, the legislation for midwifery came in 1994. And prior to that, there was a cohort of us who were practicing midwifery, but we had to do it under the table. You had to be very careful about who knew, and you had to find doctors who would do lab work for you. And then a lot of people, particularly in communities of faith, didn't want to go in the hospital, again, because of the treatment that they received. And so we were working with communities of faith, but if somebody needed to go to the hospital, we had to pretend they were relatives.
I want to add that in the US side, we can find states where midwifery is forbidden right now.
To this day.
Yeah.
Depending on the state.
Yep.
In
It is-
2026.
Yes. So there are different states that have, they allow midwives to do certain types of deliveries, but there are other states that completely forbid home birth or midwifery practice. And then in Mexico side, we have been battling the government because there are new laws trying to make sure all the midwives and traditional midwives are seen as non-specialized providers or not professional providers. So it's been a long journey of fighting for our rights to keep midwifery alive, to keep ancestral remedies, to keep midwifery in a way that it is there for the community, and especially for people that need it in the most vulnerable moments. Like for us at the border, we have been serving refugees, deportees, migrants, people that are in situations where they cannot find asylum anymore because it's since the new administration of a year ago, they cancel asylum. So people that were approved already, their cases were there approved and they were ready to go, are stuck there.
Yeah.
And they cannot go back to their home country. And when I started serving the community, I was just at the border and I saw hundreds of people just waiting there. And I saw a lot of them were Black women just waiting there. And I didn't know what was happening. I couldn't find any news or any information, not from the US side, not from Mexico side. And then I realized that I needed to do something. I brought my midwifery bag. I brought water, food, diapers, baby clothes. And that's how my journey started. It wasn't like I planned to be a human rights defender or I didn't plan to become the midwife for the midwifery, for the migrant community. It was just a life-changing moment where I was there and I couldn't unsee what I was seeing. And
You saw a need and then you stepped in to help.
exactly.
And Nance, throughout the documentary, you see the midwives just playing such an integral part of not only taking care of the moms and the babies, but the communities, because when you are pregnant, it's such an extremely vulnerable time. And if you're in war, that also adds another level of stress. At one point, there's a stat in the documentary that in Afghanistan, 1 in 14 women have died in childbirth more than in the war. What else surprised you the most when you were making this film?
Surprised me the most? Oh, that's a good question. I'm not easily surprised. I just think the stamina and the hopefulness in situations where you wouldn't think there would be any hope. In northern Nigeria, these kids and women, they're starving. I mean, there's a scene in the film where you see her measuring a woman's arm, and it literally is the size of, it's tiny. And the joyfulness with which these women approach their profession. And I think it just surprised me that when you're in places, you know, in the camps with you, just the hopefulness. I mean, just even the way she speaks just makes you feel like, okay, I'm going to be all right, you know. So I was really surprised to find hope. A lot of my work, a lot of my social documentaries don't leave you with a lot of hope, and this one I hope does.
Well, I just wanted to say that, you know, when you're transforming communities, it sounds like a big thing, but it's us who gets transformed.
First,
Yeah,
us.
yeah, I think, and it's every time you talk to a midwife, it's the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
I get transformed by the work. I am not who I was when I started, and that is all the babies that I've held.
How do you change?
I was pretty hardcore when I started. I was pretty tough. And I think it's almost like drip by kindness, drip by hope, drip by softness, drip. It gets rid of, you can't be hard and have a baby in your hands. You can't. And then it's just the smell of a baby.
I was going to say that, the
changes
smell,
you.
oh my gosh.
Oh my gosh, it's so...
They should bottle that, I'll buy it.
I know, but it's so particular. And those moments get lost. I don't want to slam doctors because they work under terrible conditions, even here.
Yes.
They really do.
The
But they
system
don't
is
have the
broken.
time to just take that moment and look after the parents have held the baby, to be able to look at a child and have that child look back at you. You are seeing something that is you will not see anywhere else in the world. The way that child looks at you, probably I think for the first 3 or 4 days, is very specific, and it changes who you are inside, and it makes you softer and more gentle. And that's what happened to me.
Well, speaking of like that softness, that tension, Ximena, parts of the documentary, you were pregnant, and you said that you were in denial about being pregnant. What was it like for you to take care of these moms-to-be while you were also expecting?
It was very nice to, I mean, I always feel like we are part of the community, and that is really humbling. And as Jay was saying, we always get to be on our knees to receive a baby, and that way we keep ourselves humble and respecting the mystery of life, the mystery of death, the mystery of the world where babies come from, and we welcome babies. And yes, being pregnant has been wonderful because I share with the mothers, with all the pregnant persons, that we are in the same journey, and they get to trust me more because I'm breastfeeding my baby. Well, they are talking about breastfeeding and they have questions, and sometimes I'm like, oh yes, I just passed through the same thing. And it is very nice to be human to human, connecting and getting to serve them in the same way I wanted to be delivering my own baby. And yeah.
No matter what country you were in, the midwives had like a laser focus on the mission at hand. And Nance, in some of the places you were in, were very remote. What are some of the challenges midwives have when working in remote or conflict zones?
Well, Gulbadan was really, I would say, one of the most severe cases of that. I mean, we're talking days and days to get to her village, and she would walk. I mean, the distances she would, her family members and other women in her village, the distances they have to go to get any help at all to have a baby. I mean, you're talking trudging 3 hours in snow up to your knees. I mean, you see in the film how deep the snow is, and you know, they wear sandals most of the time, and it is, you know, they only have electricity for part of the day. It is very, very tough conditions. These are very, very remote villages, and I think, I mean, that's what drove her to become a midwife. So many women are dying out there, and I mean, right now, because of the Taliban and change in government, they've actually made midwifery training illegal.
Yeah.
So you're not allowed to train as a midwife. So they're right there, how many women have they killed by doing that? So yeah, those are the challenges. Yeah, I mean, Maria is a bit different. She's not really remote, but yet she has to travel through these cartel
Colombia?
and gang lines, so every woman had their challenges,
In Nigeria, there was a mom and midwife, and the midwife there lost 2 of her own kids in a Boko Haram insurgency, but she came back to help her community. How did you take that?
Well, this sounds terrible, but it's typical. I mean, I think so many women, so many mothers lose their children in places like that and here, So, and I think it drives you to create change and to not let it happen to anybody else. So, I mean, it is a driving force in these women's life, eh?
And I would say it also happens here.
Yeah.
The women with whom I'm working, the vast majority of those people have no home to take a child to. And so what we do is we punish poverty, and the people most affected by poverty are women. And so if those women there's no housing left in Toronto. No. There is no supportive housing left at all. But if you are trying to raise your children and you don't have enough money to do that, then your housing doesn't look very good. And so somebody's going to call Child Protective Services, who's going to come in. And if there's no way to find resources, those children will be taken from the home. And if those children, you can watch it happen. If somebody has lost a child, that grief never ends. Not that it does for anybody whose child has died, but they know their child is out there somewhere, and somebody else is raising their child. And what we see very often, and what I see very often, is the more a child is taken from somebody, the more frequently she becomes pregnant. Because
Why is that?
Well,
I guess they're trying to get that back.
just the sadness upon grief, upon grief. But when you're pregnant, at least you're holding your child.
Yeah, remember, Ximena, you said when I asked, and it is a common question, people would ask me, okay, well, so, they're on a migrant, why are they having babies? They have their whole backpack on their back and their other little kid is on their shoulders, and what are they thinking, having a baby? It's like, you just have to understand that you said to me that it can be a way, and often they got pregnant by accident on the migrant trail. It wasn't their doing.
Yeah.
But also it is because it is a way to ground yourself and create a home wherever you are. And that just got me. I was like, oh yes,
But
it
life
is.
also continues. And I only say that because when we were in the camp, life continued.
Yeah.
It wasn't always bad days. We laughed, we celebrated birthdays. Babies were born in the camp because life continues. And there's something in the documentary, Ximena, that you say that it's a human right for every baby to be born in a respected way, and at the ceremony of birth, it's the way that we can change the world at the beginning of life. Can you tell me more about that?
Yeah, I feel like that's the way that we're healing the world, by every beginning. If we are welcome in the world, if we are receiving a blessing or a loving moment, a present.
You're catching hope.
Yes, exactly.
You catch hope.
Oh, that would have been a better title.
Catching hope.
Sorry to interrupt, but that's
Yes,
exactly
yes.
what it is that you're holding hope. Even for somebody whose child may be taken away, that's hope for them.
And we're healing together, because I've served families that passed through the Darien jungle and they left their children there because they couldn't carry their bodies and they didn't have the chance to do a funeral, and they just had to keep going. And then they finally arrived to the border and they realized, oh, my children were there. And then I'm pregnant, and then I'm having a baby, and it is a way to heal at that moment. That ceremony, be present, is something that we can hold space for them to heal those situations, that life experience that was terrible, the horrors, and then start again. And as you just said, life wants to continue. Life will start again. And then there is a moment of hope, of happiness, a moment of having choices and having a new life arriving into the world. And maybe this time they get to
this time.
maybe this time they get to
Maybe
hold
this
them.
time.
Maybe
like
this
creating
time.
their own community. It's like
Yes.
creating community.
But it's maybe this time.
Yeah.
Maybe this time. And I think when we treat women with respect, or anybody who's giving birth with the respect, that they have the power, because women having babies are immensely powerful. And so if you respect and you say, I see your power, then that you're not giving something back, but as much as you're polishing that reflection back to the woman, you have this power to do this extraordinary thing, and it can be transformative. And in my case, sometimes people look for fairy tale endings in the work that I do, and then there often isn't any. People living on the street, you're not changing their life. But if you can give them dignity and respect and acknowledge their power where they have none usually, and give them access to seeing the hope that they're creating when they see that they don't have usually, that those things can be transformative for people, where they just stand up a little bit taller and say, I gave birth.
It's empowering. We're almost wrapping up our conversation, but Nance, I wanted to ask you another scene in the documentary. It was incredible to watch a mother in Nigeria give birth without making a sound. What went through your mind when you were filming that?
Very different than myself giving birth. I was definitely not quiet. Yeah, no. I just think it was just honor. I was so honored that I could watch and be a part of, because you only see the parts I shot, but I also was kind of helping, and, I put the camera down and, rubbed her back and things like that. I was helping as much as I could. Yeah.
It's interesting you said that, because most times when you watch documentaries, because filmmakers are observing, but you put the camera down and you stepped in.
I'm not good at that.
Yeah.
I tell you, I could win a Pulitzer with the stuff that I've missed because I put my camera down to help.
Why help?
Why help?
Yeah.
I couldn't live with myself if I didn't. So there were times there where, someone needed to bring in the water, and then also when she gave birth, because she was starting to hemorrhage, well, I don't want to give away everything, but the baby was kind of just left, by herself. And I was like, so I grabbed the baby and, I put my camera down and
you did the bounce?
Because she was crying, and I just didn't want to, didn't want her to feel abandoned, because it was that they had to deal with the mom. And so, there wasn't enough people to do that, to take care of the baby while the mom was being...
And I would say that protecting those first times, the blueprint, the arriving moments are very important, because it is oxytocin. It is the love hormone right there. And holding a baby and explaining like, oh, your mom is getting some help. She will be fine. She will be right back to you. And just those precious first moments in life matter forever, for the rest of our lives. The way we are born, the way, even if babies don't make it, it is important to have the respect for a mother to hold their child and say goodbye and kiss a baby. And even in those moments, it is very important for mothers, for babies, to have that specific moment not taken away.
That you were loved.
It's very true. Even if a baby has died and the parent's holding the baby, if you get out of the way and you stand away, you will see them. Yes, the grief is extraordinary. It's horrendous, but they'll kind of stop crying for a minute, and you see them playing with the features on the face and cupping the head.
And they'll rock the baby.
And they'll rock the baby and talk to the baby, because it is in a way, that baby lives forever with that person. And if they have that time to know who this child was as much as they can, then that changes who they are.
Okay, you're gonna make me cry, Jay.
Sorry.
We
No.
honor those moments.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
you're
we
loved.
also see, I think, as midwives, it's not just always happiness and fruition. We see on the other side, we see these mysteries on the other side. You can't like you say, you can't unsee the miracles that you've seen. You can't unsee the grief that you've seen, and you know there's something over there. And I'm not wanting to be evangelical about it, but somebody asked me once if I believed in God or something bigger than me, and it was like, yes, look what I do.
We are witnesses of
Yeah.
that.
And also, I think birth is oversimplified.
Yes.
It's this idea that your body's going to know what to do when the time comes. And in some cases, it's true. When I was pregnant the first time, I did the birthing classes, and I paid attention to it's a fruit size. I should not have. I should have been reading parenting books. But I digress. What I thought was really interesting, when my body couldn't do what it was supposed to do, quotation marks, I felt as if I had failed in some way, which leads me to, in the documentary, you're wearing a sweatshirt that says the Toronto Birth Center. And the way that the Toronto Birth Center has a really interesting history. A lot of people fought to bring that into fruition. Can you tell us more about that, please?
I can't speak to it as somebody who was involved in bringing it to fruition. But there were so many people who worked so hard to bring it to actually being a structure where, like, there's over 1,000 babies been born in there now. And where I work, our clinic is right above that. And I know when a baby's being born down there. And it just excites me. Like, you walk into a hospital and birth has been torn out of there. There's no sound. If you come to a Toronto hospital, there's no sound. You can't hear birth because it's not birth that's happening there. It's a medical
A
event.
medical procedure.
Yeah, it's a procedure. Whereas if you go to the birth center, these are people having babies.
So lots of sounds.
So there's sounds and there's life happening, and there's mothers out there
Music
making
playing.
tea for somebody, or there's making eggs after the baby's born, or it's just this beautiful community, and it's
Just bringing them a bagel and a beer, which is what my midwife did.
Love that.
but it's also I have to say that it is Indigenous governed, and it was Indigenous designed. The Indigenous community in Ontario and in Canada is finally being given its due and being seen for the richness in the culture and the health that they bring. The things that I was taught by the compañeros, because I was working in Mexico and in Texas, they're the ones who taught, yes, they taught me how to catch a baby and do all, basically a taxi driver can catch a baby if the baby's coming out. If that's the case, I'm going to digress here. Students hated me because I wouldn't let them catch the baby. Because when a baby is coming out, the back of the baby's head comes first. And we've taken this away from families, but if you let that child come out, it comes out face down when things are happening in the usual way. And then the baby will turn before the shoulders are born. And this is when they'll often open their eyes, is right there. So I make sure that somebody in the family should be there. But wait, it's more than that. If you continue to leave that child alone and let nature happen, the baby will, as it comes out, turn all the way around to face up to the person who's having the baby. And as the arms are born, there's a reflex, and who cares what man it was named after, but there is a reflex where the baby will open its arms wide and cry while it's looking up. And this is that invitation to parent me, love me, pick me up. I am here, I am yours. And they're looking. And we've taken that, something as simple as that, as honoring the sacredness of what is happening here and getting out of the way. We've taken so much. So I would make sure the head's coming out the right way. Yes, there's no cord, shoulder's gonna fit, fine. Nobody by the bed. Nobody. If there's a partner, if there's an auntie, if there's a grandmother, that's who should the baby's hands.
That bond, so they have
That.
You almost made me cry, Jay, because I was picturing what you were saying, and it's just like, it's so beautiful to hear, because that was me. That was the opposite of my
But if
experiences.
you can give that.
But it's
to
so beautiful.
But if
My
you can
goodness.
give that to somebody whose child is going to be taken away,
Yeah.
then they, and this is me just making my point here, and you can cut this out. But if they,
We're leaving it in.
if they can be the ones to catch their own baby and pull their own baby up, then that hasn't been taken from them. That hasn't been stolen.
I want to say in Spanish, dar a luz,
Sí.
bring life,
Yeah.
bring light.
And it's
Yeah.
kind of like an invisible string between the mother
You can
and
see
the
it,
child. No matter where
practically.
they go. And I always say this to my kids, that there's an invisible string
Yeah.
between us, wherever you are, I am. You mentioned the differences of having a baby in a hospital as opposed to in something like the Toronto Birth Center. I wanted to talk a little bit about how the differences are for hospital versus midwifery. Who would like to take that?
I can just,
Yeah.
because
Go
I'm
for
going
it.
to,
Yeah.
you were talking about La Luz.
Yes.
And I just want to finish off on that because I've told people this, but I don't know how many babies I've caught. Thousands probably, and held newborns. I don't know how many. And I think my hands have a knowledge that my brain doesn't have. If I really want to know what position a baby's in, I have to close my eyes. If I'm turning a baby to make sure it's in a good position, I have to close my eyes because the art is in our hands. But I also think sometimes after a baby's born, if I'm the one who's caught it, if you turn the lights out, our hands will shine. Because it is so sensual. I lack the words to kind of describe.
Intuitive?
Sacred.
Yeah, the loose is the light, but it's everything. You smell, you hear, you feel, you touch, you see, and it all goes inside you. But it's all, you're holding this enormous piece of profound energy in your hands.
One of my teachers, Nicole Franklin Morales, she's writing many books about restoring midwifery, and she talks about these other senses that we have.
Yeah.
As Jay was saying,
Yeah.
it's not just the five senses as we know them.
No.
It's more. It's like we are there with our spirit, with our
Yep.
emotions, with our whole, with wholeness, protecting those moments and witnessing, the moment of, hormones, oxytocin, love.
Yeah.
And even for survivors of sexual assault and for survivors of horrors, that moment is very special and that moment is unique. And we get to see that. And
Again and again. What a gift.
yes. And they say in Spanish, dar a luz, which means bring light. So we bring light into the world, and that enlightenment is healing, is peace, and that begins at birth.
The other difference I just want to say too, having been a part of both a lot, I think we were talking the other day and someone said, most likely if you're in a hospital, like, if you're very lucky to have your own doctor that you've seen a couple of times before, if you've had a healthy, pregnancy, you most likely are going to be in a room full of strangers. And that, to me, when you're in a room with a midwife who has come to your home and has seen you there, and you've created a bond with them and their assistant midwife, and and then they stay with you after, and you know, they help you bathe, and I mean the nurturing things that happen when you have a home birth, and you know, your bed is clean, and you crawl in bed with your baby, and like I say, they bring you a bagel and a beer, and and everyone is there, and it's a nurturing, you know, happy, quiet, maybe dim lit, you know, with lovely music. Ximena had whale music playing the whole time, and it sounded so weird in the audio of the film because it was like, you know, and you're like, I'm like, oh, what is that noise? Oh, it's the whales.
I have to say, though, that is also the privilege that we have, that we want to be able to make sure that globally people have that privilege. Because I think, well, I know the vast majority of babies born in the world are born into the hands of midwives. And that lack of respect, those numbers don't get counted.
No.
But it is true that, and also to combine it with what you were saying, there is something, I think, for midwives, and maybe it's doctors, I should ask, I don't know. But for midwives, when there is a skill that you didn't learn, that is in there that you call upon at times, and it's a knowledge that you call upon at times when you know that things are not as they seem, or that things will be okay. You can't push through a disaster situation just by hope. You better know what you're doing. If you don't know what you're doing, you're not a midwife, you're a bystander catching a baby. So you must have knowledge. Your hands must know what they're doing. But for the majority of people in the world, those babies are caught by midwives who do have that skill. And all they need are the resources to be able to have those kinds of births. There's so much poverty in the world, and this disparity, the one thing that runs across all of those landscapes is birth and death. They're the two things
That make us human.
That's right, that make us human. And to be able to be attended by somebody with any knowledge at all is in many places considered a real privilege.
I've so enjoyed this conversation. This is an incredible documentary. Thank you so much. Congratulations.
Come watch it.
So much. It's tremendous.
I just wanted to give you an opportunity to add anything that you might have, that I might have missed. Nance, I'll start with you.
Well, just one thing I would like to know, if you do watch the documentary, want to tell people, if you do watch the documentary and you want to do something to help the midwives who are, you know, there's statistics out there that are pretty horrific. A woman dies every 2 minutes in childbirth. If you want to do something to help, the International Confederation of Midwives on my page has a fund that you can, on deliveryline.com, thedeliveryline.com, you can go to our impact page, and you can either host a screening or you can get some fundraising going in your community to help these midwives. Yeah, I mean, I really would. The whole reason you make these films is to create awareness and build bridges, and change the world, and so.
We'll also share those links as well. And Ximena?
Well, I would say support your local midwives and support student midwives is the best way to continue passing this legacy and not letting midwifery die. Is what we're doing, protecting midwifery, protecting our medicines, protecting ancestral knowledge by preserving midwifery.
And Jay?
Mine was incredibly selfish. I could not wait to meet you. Having seen you in the film, I just recognized so much of what you were saying. And it was just that midwifery kind of, oh, I must meet her.
Is this the first time you're meeting?
Way.
Yeah,
Yes.
and we were so excited.
I dropped my coffee and I was so excited hugging her.
Well,
yes.
also, I mean, Jay was you were a little hesitant to be in the film. You were.
I was very hesitant.
Yeah.
Why?
Yeah.
Why? I'm protective of the people with whom I'm working because there is poverty porn. Do you know what I mean? Poverty
Yeah.
porn, yeah. And so I have been approached by other people. Oh, let me see these people. Well, you're out of the door because nobody's talking about folks as these people. This is not, an Oscar for you. Go away.
So why did you say yes to Nance?
I think they kind of kept knocking on the door.
And
We
I
drove her
would add
crazy.
something because it is important to share the human side of the conflicts and the human stories, because the narrative right now is that, there's no migration. There's no migration, there are no refugees anymore, everything is fine, everyone has access to health, everyone has the ability to go to the hospital, doctor, or whatever. But the reality is that we see every day women, pregnant people that are not having access because they lack an ID or a birth certificate, or they lost everything during difficult times. And that's the people we serve, the community we are providing services. And again, there are different conflicts around the world, and the people serving, the providers at the front line is always midwives.
Yeah, it's always midwives, but I think also it's important never to forget that conflict happens here. That in Toronto, there is such a disparity that you have people. Take my hand for 1 minute. I don't think yours is nice and warm. Under the bridges, which is where people used to live, they've done something called hostile architecture. And instead of smooth stones where people can at least get a tarp or even cardboard to keep themselves warm as possible in the winter, they'll just put up lines of cardboard. Now, the city has put stones, so you can't sleep anywhere there.
So it's
And
too
they're-
uncomfortable to sleep.
Yeah, you can't. It's pebbles this big against each other all over. And so even the places, we have made it such that there are people who have to live under those bridges. Nobody grew up saying, oh, I want to be addicted to substances. There was always something that attends that. That's what I've learned. Some trauma, some
Nature disaster,
Yeah.
conflict, war. Violence.
That's right. Being taken from their family, being taken from their culture, being taken from their ancestral knowledge. All of those things have caused people to experience such trauma that that's where they are. And then we don't have enough housing for them.
I want to add that it is not them and us.
Yeah.
It is not racism, xenophobia, discrimination. It is all of us every day.
Yep.
And for different reasons. It can be myself, my family tomorrow, because war is happening everywhere, and it can happen to all of us, a disaster or something. And it can be me, my family tomorrow, needing services or sexual reproductive health access. And who's going to deliver that? A midwife.
Yep.
This was Mistreated. Thanks for listening. You can follow our show wherever you get your podcasts so you can get notified each time a new episode is available. We would love to hear your feedback. You can write me an email at mistreatedpodcast@tvo.org or reach out to me on social media. I have an Instagram comment from our episode Unforced and Coerced Sterilizations. It reads in part, there are Indigenous women who had sterilization who felt forced to do it. I've met some of them. While I choose to be child-free and chose my procedure, I was told I would change my mind. Thank you so much for that comment. I think it speaks to how we should all have the choice to choose. This week's episode was produced by Tiff Lamb and me and edited by Colin Kish. Digital shorts by Ariana Longley, camera work by Max Tussey, teleprompting by Christy McLeod. Production support from Jonathan Hallowell and TVO's Digital Media Services team. Lori Few is the executive producer of Digital. Stacey Duncease is acting vice president, programming and content. Thanks so much for listening.